Welcome, everybody, and thank you for stopping on by today. My name is Jeff. I'm a retired Chief Petty Officer with the United States Navy. I'm in my 28th year now of researching Colonel Fraser and the 7 Years of War. Before I get started, I'd like to thank you guys for being here. You guys make the channel. I do this for you. And also, we've got some new subscribers. So I hope I can present some interesting material to earn your subscription. There's a lot of wonderful military historians which have covered the war aspect of it with great perfection. Personally, I like to concentrate on the anecdotal stuff, the stuff that the history books really don't tell you. And I recently uncovered a couple interesting items I'd like to share with you today. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get right into this. First of all, I was going through archival records like I always do, and I found this document which dates to 1757, and this is church record minutes, Kirk minutes they're called, K-I-R-K, and this is from the Blair Atoll Parish in County Perthshire, Scotland. You'll see the bracket that I have in the margin on the left-hand side. That's where we're going to start here. And it reads, testificates were ordered for John Robertson in Pittigown, Duncan McCall in Calavane, and Alexander Robertson at Bridge End of Strowan, who enlisted themselves in the Highland battalions. Well, that's kind of interesting. And I kept reading. And then on the next page, starts off here on the far right-hand side. Again, testificates were also ordered for Robert Fraser, late in Pittigown, and for Neil Stewart, late in, and I hope I don't butcher this, Aldanacle, who enlisted themselves in the Highland battalions. I said, well, that's interesting. Who are these men? Obviously, they're soldiers that are going into the army. Because they enlisted themselves, they're more than likely going to be private soldiers versus corporals or sergeants. It's possible that they were corporals and sergeants, but I don't think so. And the reason why is because I have an order, a beating order, that says that the corporals and the sergeants for Colonel Montgomerie's 1st Highland Battalion and Colonel Fraser's 2nd Highland Battalion, later renumbered the 77th and 78th, that the soldiers and corporals were to be pulled from already established British regiments. So that's why I think these guys were all private soldiers. But the question now is, which Highland Battalion? Well, excuse me, we got lucky, because I have a document here. This is a facsimile of an actual document that I have. This is pretty close to what it looks like. The state of the 1st Highland Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Montgomerie, You look at the first entry. It shows Lieutenant Colonel Montgomerie, and then the far right-hand side shows the area he was assigned to recruiting. And you see that first entry, Atoll. So that's the Blair Atoll. So he was recruiting, and he actually picked up 102 men were approved in those two areas. So you've got Atoll, and then as you come back up to the north, in County Perthshire, you pass through Strathdearn, and that's what he was doing. And you can see where the other company commanders, the other captains and majors, where they were recruiting. And what I found interesting about this was there was 472 men that were not approved out of a total of 1,029, a little bit less than 50%, So there was a large rejection. So we definitely know that these recruits were going to Colonel Montgomerie's 1st Highland Battalion. But then I thought, well, what is a testificate? So I had to dig some more. And I went down and I was looking in Glasgow, county of Lanarkshire. And I found this document. This dates to 1759, and we're looking at the very bottom entry here. It's a testificate in favor of Isabel Wilson, that Isabel Wilson resided in this parish from her infancy until Martinmas last, and departed from us free of any scandal known to the session, that's to the parish, and might be admitted into any Christian society. So a testificate was a character reference, and Martinmas was actually, it's the old St. Martin's Day. It's also known as the Old Halloween. It was a feasting day that took place every year on 11 November. So this document was July of 1759, so they're referring to Isabel leaving the November of 1758. Why it took so long to get to the testificate drawn up, I don't know. But as it pertains to the Highland battalions, what would the men do with the testificates? Well, we really don't know. Obviously, in the civilian sector, it would go from parish to parish. So it was a way of the receiving parish to know the character of the person they were receiving. As far as the Army, whether the certificates were turned in to the commander, we don't know. Whether they were turned in to the chaplain, we don't know. In fact, this is the first time I've ever run across anything named a testificate. Now, what I have found is a long time ago, a couple years back, I was going through the records for the archives in Northern Ireland, and you'll see this document here dated March 10th, 1757. This is just an archival entry we're looking at. And the very bottom line, talking about, will now pay the fine, though under protest, as not one of the recruits were Papists, that's Roman Catholics, or had falsely signed the religious certificate, and that there had been no court martial. So in this case here, they're talking about potentially Irish recruits. Obviously, they didn't want Papists in their army, but that they may have required religious certificates for the Irish. Now, I don't know why that would be, because this was under rule of the British government, Ireland and Scotland. So I don't know if a religious certificate is pertaining to a testificate. It may not have been. We may be looking at two different documents. This may have been a religious certificate signifying what their religion was, to ensure that no Papists were incorporated into the armies. Can't say, there's just not enough information. I even went to the Recruiting Act, the 1757 Recruiting Act, to see if I could find more, but it only talks about how Papists were not authorized to enlist. Whether they still got through, we honestly don't know. So I found that portion of it, the religious certificates and the testificates, kind of interesting. I wanted to share it with you. If you have any information about it, I would love to hear it. Please drop it in the comments so we can all learn from it. The next thing I want to talk about is, it dates back to 1385. And the reason why I had to go back, sometimes you got to go backwards to learn the history to come forward. But I found a recruiting expense book for the 1st Highland Battalion. I know here it says the 77th. That's because this is a recreation. This particular expense book that I have, the sheet that I have from it, it's somebody else's picture, so I don't own the copyright to it. So I had to make up my own facsimile. This is pretty darn close to what it looks like, but obviously, again, a facsimile. But you'll notice the two areas that are highlighted here. The 77th, or at the time the 1st Highland Battalion, had actually purchased 40 St. Andrew's crosses. And you'll see that in the bottom left-hand corner of what a St. Andrew's cross looks like. What we don't know is what the cross was made of. We don't know if it was a decorative type of cloth, for example, maybe embroidered with silk. If you look at the price on the far right-hand column, £32 for 40 crosses. That's about 16 shillings a piece. Seems kind of expensive. So we don't know if they were made of metallic, maybe some type of silver, or like a cast iron bronze, or whatever type of metals were being made up and produced during the 7 Years' War. We honestly don't know. There's, again, not enough information out there. But also they had purchased 20 silk sashes. Those 20 silk sashes were likely going to be for the 20 original sergeants. There was 10 original companies, 2 sergeants to each company. The officers, 10 original companies, there were 4 officers. So that's why we think the St. Andrew's crosses were going to be for the officers, while the silk sashes would be for the sergeants. Now the silk sashes, they had an exorbitant price, £50 for 20 of them. Pretty expensive. So I had to kind of turn a little bit more going back to history. So in 1385, an ordinance created by Parliament states, there's a little blurb in there that states that all men, French and Scots, because the French and Scots were fighting together against the British, that they have a sign on the front and at the back, which was namely a white cross of St. Andrew. So you see the British on the right-hand side. They wore the red cross of St. George. That was their emblem. And you see the Scots with their white crosses. And the reason for that was unit identity, basically. They didn't have organized uniforms back in 1385 like we have today, or like they even had going into the 7 Years' War. So they needed some way to identify who's who. And that's what these guys did. So the white cross of St. Andrew, worn by the Scots and French alike, it was a battlefield identifier. It was typically a white cross sewn or appliqued on the front and the back of the garment. And if the garment was white, the cross was to be placed on a piece of black cloth, again, to ensure visibility. So that's the way they did things back then. Now, we don't know, fast forwarding from 1385 to 1757, we don't know if those crosses that Colonel Montgomerie had ordered and purchased were going to serve the exact same purpose. We don't know if they were, like I said, metallic and maybe tucked away in a Bible somewhere. I would think if they were worn in battle in 1757, that the history books might have picked that up. But nobody's ever reported on it. So we honestly don't know. I turned to ChatGPT again here. I just want to give you an idea of what they may have looked like if, in fact, the Highland battalions displayed them on their uniforms versus tucking them in the Bible. We think because the crosses appeared alongside clearly identifiable military dress items in the expense book, like the sashes, for example, that they were likely official regimental insignias rather than religious keepsakes or any type of, devotional objects. But again, it's speculation. We think they were typically, 3 inches across, maybe 4 inches across by this time. You can see back in 1385, they were quite bigger. But there's just unfortunately no surviving regulation describing the exact appearance or placement of these crosses, if in fact that they were worn on the uniform and or the headdress. Whether they were in battle or maybe they were just used for regimental parade. So the order to wear the right white cross, this is just kind of a summary that I had done up here from the top left, showing the 1385, how they agreed to wear the crosses, again, what they may have looked like back in those days. And then I just had a little depiction of Montgomerie's Highlanders, maybe showing it on the shoulder blade there attached to the plaid. It's hard to say. And then you see the entry in the expense book. I went ahead and put that in there. And again, what we don't know, how the crosses were worn, where they were placed. We talked about that. And they're in the bottom right-hand corner there's a plausible reconstruction of what it may have looked like. Again, a lot of suppositions here. The crosses may represent a transitional military tradition, combining older Scottish national symbolism, maybe with newer British regimental organization. But the surviving accounting entry is important because small ceremonial uniform details like this were often poorly documented. Again, you don't see that kind of stuff in the history books. So when we can find something like this, I get really excited about it. Well, I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight to the religious testificates and the history of the White Crosses, how it dates back to 1385, and how it may have still been around during the 7 Years' War. Again, thank you for stopping on by, everybody. I appreciate you. And if you have any questions, by all means, please reach out in the comment section. Let me know what's on your mind. You can always get a hold of me through the website. I appreciate you. Thank you for the new subscribers. And we will see you next time. Take care.